Let's now change scenario and talk about genomics. Nutritional genomics of butter. We shall do that with Professor Rossi, who is a specialist in food science and professor at the University of Bologna. A short time ago, there was an article stating that butter is the most erotic dairy product, and they were not referring to Bertolucci's film. Is that right? Well, thank you very much for inviting me here, and I apologize for my voice. The Sardinian wind has actually betrayed me when I was in Cagliari in the last few days. Anyway, I shall try to give my presentation as best as I can. I have analyzed 45 lipidic molecules and 15 molecules of vitamins, minerals, and other butter components. In my research work, I have understood very well that butter is a Mediterranean type of food. Butter comes from Bousteros in Greek bovine cheese, and it is an important part of the Mediterranean diet. And it is also interesting to see that nutrition is quickly changing. Claims that used to play a fundamental role have now proven to be ungrounded from a scientific viewpoint. Conversely, new research work is opening up new scientific horizons. We need to give a content to quality. And we have seen so far that food has been measured in terms of calories and calorie intake. But we know today that the human body does not use calories to live, to survive. So there are no calories inside the human body, which is the chemical machinery using chemical energy to live, and not heat. Heat is not used by the human body to live. This means that the whole world based on the calorie intake is collapsing. ATP is the chemical energy used by the human body, adenylyl triphosphate. However, apart from this, there are very fast changes in the field of genomics. That is, the research about the effect produced by food molecules on the DNA of our cells. The qualitative horizon of food will be measured in the future based on the molecules that are contained in the food, not on each single component. That is, butter has a nutritional value that goes beyond the addition of its single components. The old world of food science, which was predominantly based on gossips, which was not sufficiently scientific, has somewhat compared the butter to the devil, highlighting only certain molecules and forgetting the whole mix that makes up butter. In our analysis, butter is viewed as a formula consisting of numerous fatty acids. Fatty acids can, in turn, be divided into short-chain fatty acids, 12.5%, monounsaturated fats, saturated fats, and polyunsaturated fats. So the extreme variety of fatty acids contained in butter make up a formula which must be viewed as a whole and not only as its single components. But what is emerging today is the effect of food on the DNA, and fatty acids are molecules that so far have been looked at as if they were merely aggressive molecules rather than natural components of the human body. So we need to take a rational, balanced approach based on scientific evidence. We need a scientific method, in other words. And the new horizon that is opening up is that of gene modulation. This is the future of quality and will become increasingly more important. Unless we jump on this train, if we go on thinking like in the past about calories or simple nutritional claims, well, we will be left behind and this world is practically over. In other words, my presentation has the purpose of giving the contribution by a person who's been working in nutrition for 40 years. Nutritional genomics is the study of the effects of food molecules on DNA. You can refer to this with other synonyms such as epigenetics, nutrigenomics, and nutraceutics. But to understand what it is, we're talking about gene modulators. And gene modulators are molecules that are contained in food. They are like the software of a computer. Inside the hardware, which is our body, it produces the gene expression or the phenotype. I've heard about genetics and genomics before in milk production. Well, milk is a phenotypical type of food. That is, we eat what the animal feeds on, and if the animal is fed in a certain way, milk and milk derivatives will or won't contain certain molecules. The revolution that will take place starting from next year in terms of food labeling, these elements will be included. To give you a picture of what gene modulation is, let me tell you that inside our cells we have chromosomes. Inside chromosomes we have genes. And if we have a positive molecule, there will be an effect on the gene which will produce a positive gene expression. Conversely, you may not have the molecule or an aggressive molecule that will either block the gene or lead to hyperexpression of the gene with lesions to the human body. No calories have any effect on the DNA. So it's useless to talk about food in terms of calorie intake. Please jump into the world of genomics, because calories have no scientific basis any longer. It's pointless to talk about food in terms of calories. Let me give you another example to make sure I'm really clear. And if you want, you can then read the bibliography that you can see here in red. Bee larvae and the queen bee have the very same DNA. Larvae eat royal jelly for 3 days and they transform into normal bees. The queen bee feeds for the whole life on royal jelly and is the queen bee. That is, the DNA is the same, but if you eat or if you do not eat a certain type of food, you have a completely different phenotype. And this is what happens to our cells. And let me stress this, not because I want to sound aggressive, but because we should not neglect this. No calorie has any effect on the DNA. The molecules contained in food have an effect on the DNA. Let me quote another example. The caterpillar and the butterfly, identical DNA. The butterfly eats cauliflower and transforms into butterfly. The same DNA, the phenotype changes. The caterpillar has one phenotype, the butterfly has another phenotype. And obesity is a phenotypical disease. Memory is a phenotypical expression. So if we manage to understand this world, we will realize that this is the post-genomic phase. Let me repeat this once again. Daily calories have no role whatsoever. Let me give you an example of genome age and the value of fatty acids, which are gene modulators. That is, they're molecules that affect the DNA, which is represented here. These are fatty acid molecules that enter the cells. This is the cell membrane. They are taken from transcription factors and proteins, and they're taken into the DNA. And the DNA keeps everything under control. That is the way we are, and all cell functions are submitted to DNA control. So if poor fatty acids, bad fatty acids, or malproduced fatty acids, or degenerated fatty acids are present, such as arachidonic acid, and a lot of meat and a lot of dairy products unfortunately contain arachidonic acid, which is an indicator of poor quality, because we eat what the animal feeds on. But if you don't analyze arachidonic acid, you may not realize that. Public opinion, however, is very advanced, much more advanced than you think, and many people go and check for arachidonic acid. Marketing today must focus on contents, because they're so important for public opinion. So short-chain fatty acids, let me focus on this aspect alone, make up 12.5% of butter, or of the fatty acids contained in butter. Short-chain fatty acids affect enzymes, specifically histone deacetylase, and butter with butyric acid is able to stabilize and promote transcriptomics of DNA. In other words, the fatty acids present in the butter can have a significant effect, and this has been demonstrated by recent scientific research works. Here you have the list of all short-chain fatty acids. Specifically, I have focused on butyric acid. I don't want to bore you too much, so you will find the bibliography and all the references at the bottom of my slides. These are all the types of food that have molecules that have an interaction with the DNA. Butyric acid is one of these molecules. They transform DNA transcriptomics. These are other molecules that affect the methylation of DNA. I don't know if you have ever done this test, homocysteine test. Has anybody ever done the homocysteine test? When you have a high value, this means that your DNA is malfunctioning. Because, of course, scientific observations must then be tested into reality. And if you need to check your DNA function, you can submit yourself to the homocysteine test. This is a DNA base. This is a methylic group. And this group, if this group is absent, we have a change in methylation and you have an increase of homocysteine in blood. Homocysteine is much more aggressive than cholesterol. Here's another example. We have to eat hydrosoluble fibers, because hydrosoluble fibers in your intestine keeps the microbiota and bacteria alive. By feeding on hydrosoluble fiber, they produce butyric acid, propionic acid, and acetic acid. Butyric acid is produced through the ingestion of fibers that are then transformed into butyric acid. This is done by the microbiota. If you eat butter, you have an intake of butyric acid that will play its role with the gene modulation on colon cells and microbiota bacteria. To show you the way scientific research is going, I have listed here some scientific references regarding the genomics effect of butyric acid. There are studies about other molecules as well. But let me focus on this publication dating back to May 2015, a very recent one, stating that butyric acid stabilizes DNA in this very aggressive type of tumor, such as breast cancer. In other words, research is moving forward. So far, I've given you epigenetic examples. Let's now focus on gene modulation, which is slightly different. These are molecules, both vegetal and animal, and here we have retinoic acid. Why am I talking to you about retinoic acid? Because retinoic acid, together with beta-carotene, can be found in butter. So if you focus on the different molecules that are contained in butter, rather than focusing on cholesterol alone, we can really understand the nutritional value of a food type that needs to be repositioned. Some years ago, together with the lawyer, Mr. Brazzale, I chose to defend butter, to juxtapose science with gossip. Gossip has destroyed butter, talking about cholesterol and other negative sides. Conversely, science has a more serene approach to butter, identifying its different components. Gene modulation and retinoic acid. Here you can see that fat molecules are brought to PPAR. Retinoic acid plays a role thanks to the receptor, and together they affect the DNA. If there is no retinoic acid, let me say this again, without retinoic acid there is no gene modulation, which means that the DNA is blocked. Conversely, in the presence of retinoic acid, the DNA works. And these effects have been proven in scientific literature. So the food molecule affects the DNA, and the DNA is individual. Every one of us has got his or her DNA. They're all different. The DNA is our scientific star, because to identify a person, we use the DNA. All the persons in this room, none has got a DNA identical to another one. All what we eat reaches our cells. The cells affect the DNA. And all what is downstream of the DNA is the so-called gene expression. The DNA is a genotype. It won't change throughout your life. All the rest will change, such as the phenotype, which is a gene expression. But the genotype, that is, the phenotype, the expression of the DNA, is a consequence of what we eat. This has opened up a new world and will transform marketing and advertising. Most do not know the world of genomics yet, but it's only a question of time. And if you want to plan the future of your companies, you must enter this world. And all what is underneath here is the phenotype. The DNA and the DNA language is made up of proteins. 1 gram of protein means 4 calories. Well, you could tell me that back in the 19th century, but this is not the future, this is not the present time, because proteins are the language of the DNA, and they can affect the metabolism of sugars, amino acids, lipids, and they determine the phenotype, which is what we are. These are all the receptors inside the cells. They are controlled by retinoic acid. And I'm very keen on stressing this. There is also an important relationship between beta-carotene and vitamin D, which, together with transretinol, play a very important role. We have examined butter, and it contains these 3 fundamental elements. So please, let me know if you want to have more information. This is science, and science must contribute to the population's improved health. So what has changed? Everything has changed and is changing. The relationship between diet and health prior to nutritional genomics was totally different, because we used to believe that the very same diet would give the very same effects on everybody, because this was based on calories. From genomics onwards, the relationship between diet and health in the age of nutritional genomics expresses the variability in the response to diet as a function of the genome of each person. So there is no diet that has identical effects on everybody. Everybody must find his or her own specific diet. So this is our future, and I'd like to conclude with Schopenhauer stating that people are not afraid of new ideas, they're afraid of leaving behind old ideas. And this represents very well what is happening in the science of nutrition, as well as what is happening in our society in Italy and worldwide. It is very hard to leave behind old ideas. It means leaving behind power and starting studying and committing yourself. This was my contribution. Thank you very much for your attention.
Grazie. Grazie professore. Una comunicazione.
Thank you very much. Let me tell you that you can find all the slides of our speakers on the CLAL website. I would like to call the butter lawyer, Mr. Brazzale, to come and give a brief comment.
Beh, il burro non ha bisogno di avvocati, tantomeno del sottoscritto, perché
well, the butter doesn't need any lawyer, nor does it need me. It doesn't need any defense. I'd like to thank Professor Rossi for his very nice presentation. Well, it was complex, but that's good, because turning complex concepts into trivial ones will not help us to defend our ideas. At this point, I'd like to turn to my colleagues. And very briefly, let me tell you what my company has decided to do. We have always produced butter, and we, as many of you, for 30, 40 years have gone through a stage of depression. We're all depressed. We lost confidence in our product. We do not believe anymore in our product, and we tend to believe the rumors and the gossips that are out there onto the market about our product. We believed this because we had no means to defend quality, so we suffered because of gossips. We kind of suffered the Stockholm syndrome, and we embraced our critics. Instead of questioning the statements that we heard, and now these statements have turned out to be totally false, totally unjustified, and evidence proves it. So what we decided to do within our company, considering that, recently we understood what science was telling us and what evidence was giving us, well, we kind of developed a newfound pride for our product. Well, please remember that butter is nothing but a concentration of fat. Fat content is higher in butter than you find in cheese. 20 grams of butter correspond to 30 grams of buffalo mozzarella cheese. And the issue is always the same. Consumers were scared. In a number of countries, like in the United States, the public administration has strongly criticized and demonized animal fat. But now Americans are more obese than they used to be. They have more cardiovascular problems. They have more diabetes. because they have replaced animal fat with carbohydrates. Now, in this kind of campaign, huge investments were made to promote the spreading of false scientific data. It was a kind of a war, somehow, between vegetal fat, animal fat, and carbohydrate. Now, we were involved naively in this kind of war. And also we did that in good faith, if you wish. But what is happening today is really extraordinary because we have scientific evidence, we have statistical data that tells us that what we were told was absolutely not true. There was no ground behind this. Now, we inside ourselves tend to consider nutrition as something very simple, and sometimes we tend to read only those nutritional labels which are oversimplistic, because these do not help us to understand the characteristics of our products. I mean, when you see the nutritional complexity described by Professor Rossi before, who is going to be able to interpret this data? Now, I'm perhaps taking up too much of your time, but I'd like to tell you that my co-workers, my brothers, my friends, will now believe that we need to find a new way to become proud again about butter. Now we have a new truth, and we should spread this truth to the consumers. Now we read data and we read questions that were used to survey the opinion of consumers. But for me, the fundamental question was not there, which should have been, how many times did you give up eating cheese because you're afraid? I know the answer. You don't need to ask that question. Now, thinking that you can start increasing consumption of butter by removing fear, well, that's possible. And you know that fear is sometimes fundamental. And we, as a family, as a company, are committed to carry out a campaign that we are promoting with our own resources, so not a very big campaign. And through this campaign, we kind of launched a number of rules to try and make sure that consumers get rid of prejudices about butter. So I don't want to switch off your mic, but try to be brief. Okay, I tell you that we also included micro clips in our packaging. These are 2 minutes video clips that will explain the consumers what Professor Rossi has just said. So with the QR code, you can see these videos. So labels by themselves will not help our consumers, but through these videos that sees Professor Rossi involved, will help our consumers understand what butter is. I'd like to invite my colleagues to kind of make a revolution, to start a new renaissance, because we need to be proud again about animal fat. I mean, we are in the forefront because we produce butter, but all dairy producers should join us in this battle. So this is an invitation to join forces and to really do something together to safeguard and to promote butter. Because if my butter sells well and is understood well, this will promote the sales of other butters as well. So I think it's very important to join forces. We should exchange information and material so that consumers get rid of what they've learned, but that finally they will get the truth. Because really, and it's not us who are the victims of these false campaigns, but it's the consumers who are not eating as well as they should. So I really ask you to join us and to join forces so that we can start a new butter renaissance. Okay, at the end of this butter pride comment by our